Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. And welcome to another edition of our special mini-series on the season 2 of The Last of Us. I could have said that much better. But basically, season 2 of The Last of Us. The first season, we did a little mini-series where we recap every episode and then talk about the themes. And we're doing it again for season 2. And it's been a delight so far, even if the subject matter is not so delightful sometimes. That is something that I love, apparently. There are spoilers for the most recent episode to have come out, as this episode comes out a week before. And also the previous episodes, season 1, the first game, and parts of the second game, though not necessarily plot points that are going to relate to the second season. It's very complicated. But we were very careful. And honestly, they've changed a lot of things up. So I've got some questions myself. I don't know.
I would turn around with some questions during it. I'm like, did this happen in the game?
Like, no.
And you're like, no. I'm like, who are these people?
So we are being careful, but we also don't quite know ourselves, even though I have played the game a lot, and Samantha has watched me play it and heard me talk about it a lot. But yes, so basically we go over the plot of the episode, and then I mostly talk about my thoughts about it. I have been forgetting to mention we are pausing our Sex and the City segments and our fiction just for the duration of this, because those are harder things for Christina to do. But once this is over, it's only 7 episodes. Then we will pick back up with those things. So we haven't forgotten those things, but if those are things you're really into, do not worry. Also, hopefully you enjoy these things, even if you haven't played the game or watched the show. Also, if you're still mad after what happened in the last episode, because I know some of you are. Heard from some of you. So Samantha, can you give us a recap?
Yes, I will. And by the way, a lot of writers are very upset too. When I was looking at, like, I need to go back and recap just to make sure I don't miss things. And the people all were like, well, without Pedro Pascal, like, well, damn. They really didn't see it coming. Okay, Here it is. But yes, here we go. So we are back, and we are Pedro Pascal-less. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. And we get to witness Ellie, who has been admitted to the hospital with many others, and she wakes up at the beginning, I guess, of her hospitalization, in her trauma, still witnessing in her mind Joel's death, and wakes up screaming, and then it has to be put back under. And then we also see Tommy working with Maria to get the town back to where it was. We see people like reconstructing the town. We have a really great shot of Jesse being so manly with his, giant hammer. We love it. Anyway, moving on. We also see a touching moment between Tommy and him saying goodbye to Joel, cleaning him off and saying, say hey to Sarah for me, the daughter that died in season 1. That's not a spoiler. So with all of that, heartbreaking scene, Ellie does finally wake. And during this time, she has to go through all the things in 3 months. And everybody's like, okay, is she good to go? She has to talk to Gail. Great interaction between her and Gail, in which she tries to give the perfect answers to be released, even to the fact that Gail was trying to figure out what she was mad at Joel for, and she was trying to find out what Joel insinuated when he said, I saved her, and Ellie plays, ignorant to this. She's like, I don't know. What did he say to you? Trying to also get information. But that's all we get. And she gets the clear and she goes home. She goes to see all these tributes on the fence of the home of Joel's. And we get the heartbreaking scene of her going through all his stuff, crying at the scent of his shirts. And at the same time, we hear Dina come in or knock to come in. She brings her some cookies and she's like, oh, for me. They have it back and forth for a second. She's like, just for nothing? And she's like, well, I'm about to piss you off. In which at that point, she talks about the fact that at first when she came to the hospital, Dina had lied and said she didn't know anything about the people, when actually she knew a lot, including the fact all of their names, essentially. She knew where they were part of, the WLF or Washington Liberation Front, is that right? Wolf, as you will see, and that they were going to Seattle. She knew it all. Well, not all, but she knew a good chunk. And she even knew enough information that Eugene had mentioned Wolf before, that Fedra had fought them, and to their knowledge, they had been pretty much wiped out. Doom, doom, doom. And so, of course, Ellie is pissed off because she's like, we lost all this time. We could have gone after them on all these things. And Dina was like, you would have died because you needed treatment. She was very injured. So that goes back and forth. We also see Tommy talking to Gail as well at one point, talking about, is Ellie okay? What do we need to do? Should I be concerned? And no, she's like, yes, you should be concerned. And yes, Ellie is not okay. And yes, Ellie is a liar. So there's interaction between the two of them. We also see a moment between Jesse and Ellie. Ellie's training real hard on the punching bag. So we have that moment and he's helping her. We also find out that Jesse is now a part of the council, I guess after the death of so many. And they will be making a decision on whether or not they get a posse together to go after those who had killed Joel. And he gives her a word of advice. He's like, write it down because you're not great at convincing people and you're angry and it's obvious. And he's like, and you're not going to get, your anger is not going to motivate people like Maria, who is on the council. So she's like, okay, I'll get it ready. And so we go through and they're having a huge town hall meeting, starting off with the silliest things like planting things. I think, did he talk about okra or is that in my head?
Corn.
Corn. Okay. Okay. So the back and forth on that. And then we have people talking, and one woman talks about the fact that they've lost a lot. Joel meant a lot, but everybody's lost someone at this point, and they need help in getting themselves together and can't be sending off a lot of people, especially their best people, when we just went through this thing at Jackson Hole, is what she says. So Carlisle gets up and says, we need to move on, mercy, all these things, forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. And then Seth goes on that that's bullshit. We have been attacked. These are our people, and we have to show force. This has to be about our, protecting our own. All these things. We can't be weak. And then we have Ellie stand up with her piece of paper that she had written out, and she goes from not vengeance but justice. And remembering that Maria was a prosecutor, she's like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We need justice. This is about coming to terms with understanding that this is what is right, and not necessarily because I'm angry. That's a great speech. And so they do a whole vote, and it's 3-8, 3 yes, 8 no. So it's a no. And everybody's like, who are the ones who said yes? The aftermath seems to think that Maria said yes.
Yes, it seems to be Maria and Tommy said yes, and Jesse said no. People have really tried to dig into the way the paper was collected. But I don't think that makes sense because there's no 2 yeses in a row. And Tommy and Maria were sitting next to each other. And I do believe they both said yes. But I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting. Anyway, so we have this, and Ellie is not having it. She goes home, and you see in her shed, she is getting all ready. She's got her gun. She's got the gun from Joel. She got a pack, and she's got her determination. And then at the same time, we hear Dina at the door, like, let me come in, and Ellie scrambling, like, oh God, oh God. And finally lets her in. And Dina, being the Dora the Explorer, which has been a whole meme in my world, comes with a backpack, a map, and a requirement of boots, which is, if you know, you know. She is the well-prepared person in trying to remind her how to go about things, what they need to do, the supplies, all of the things that make sense, and is well-prepared for a backpacking trip. Backpack. Anyway, and she says she has a guy who can help with guns and maybe a horse, Shimmer.
Yeah.
And anyway, moving on. And as they're getting ready to go, they meet at 3 a.m. They meet up, and Seth is the guy that is helping them, gets them a gun, a better gun with a scope, and they have a good old handshake and obviously they're on the same page here, but still Ellie doesn't like him. Rightly so, but he is very much blessing them in this travels and tell them good luck, essentially. As they move on, Tommy had told Ellie earlier where Joel was buried, and so she goes out to pay respects, and with a handful of coffee beans, which I have a feeling maybe they will see more about later, drops coffee beans on his grave and says goodbye. They ride off into the beautiful sunset. It's a very glorious scene. Sans all the gravestones.
Very beautiful. Yeah.
As they go off, we also have a snippet of another group, the Seraphites, or the Scars. You see the scars on their face, talking about war and talking about their prophetess who died but told them to move, and then that they're fleeing the Great War. They have nothing but hammers and sticks on them, it seems, in their defense, and they communicate by whistling in the way, and they travel as a pack. But during this time, as he's trying to explain everything, and the little girl gets her first hammer, and they're having kind of a sweet father-daughter moment, we hear the whistle that's like, oh, go hide. And so they all go hide, and then we go off screen. We have Dina and Ellie coming together, and I thought we were going to have maybe the scene that I thought would happen in the previous episode, in this episode, but it didn't. Leave it at that. But they do have a moment of flirtatious moments of talking about the kiss and whether it meant nothing, and then found out that Dina had gotten back together with Jesse during the time, I guess, she was in a coma or in the hospital, interestingly enough. So the back and forth happened there for a second, very cutesy interaction. And then we wake up to them traveling and finding the spot where the Scars or the Seraphites have been attacked, finding that area. We see all of them dead, including the little girl. Dina throws up. Thinking that maybe it was because of whatnot, because of the bodies and all the stench. As they move on, they kind of talk about the wolves, and again, how little small of a pack they are. We have a very infamous scene of them coming up on Seattle, which Anney gasps and have some good moments in these moments. And they get prepared to go to the wolf encampment, I guess. And then we get to a cutscene where it's just like a large group of people marching together with giant tanks with the patch WLF or wolf. End scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you see Manny in the Space Needle. And so that's one of right. Our people.
That's true. And he is on the lookout. And he misses them by barely 2 seconds. Because of the way they asked for coordinations and for what he was supposed to be looking out for.
Yes. It's kind of going back to like the whole Joel could have avoided death in so many ways. There's a lot of instances of that kind of thing.
Yeah. Happenstances.
Yeah. I have to say, like, I don't think this is a spoiler. We're going to learn more about a lot of these characters. And I do kind of feel bad for Manny's character. Because they kind of amalgamated him with another character named Jordan, who's not in the show. And I think it makes sense. But Jordan was pretty much of jackass. And Manny, I was like, oh, I could get on board. Like, I might not like some of the stuff you've done, but I see the friendliness and all that. But now he's sort of like...
But he's not.
Right. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But at this current moment, he's much douchier than he was in the game. Well, thanks, as always, Samantha, for the wonderful recap. Also, wanted to thank you for this episode. We do these watch parties, and Samantha really threw a wonderful wake. We made funeral food. You made funeral food.
I made a research, because I would assume it's similar to what I know in Georgia, and that's kind of what I was basing it on. But I did look up Texas funeral foods, and the number one was fried chicken. It's like, that makes sense. So we went and grabbed some fried chicken, but then I was like, and then obviously all the casseroles, a limp salad, and I'm not sure why it has to be limp. Maybe it's because it sat out there for so long.
It was good though. The salad was good.
The salad though I got was on point. I was like, oh, this is tasty. Maybe I just really craved vegetables. I don't know. It's been a minute. But yeah, so we had four different types of casseroles.
Yeah.
For a very small amount of people.
We had funeral potatoes, which
that was new to me. I've never had before. So that was new to me. Finding that recipe was interesting.
It's a green bean casserole, always a classic. A lasagna, some mac and cheese.
Pimento mac and cheese.
Pimento mac and cheese, because that's a golf pun, because we're terrible people. The Masters, if you don't know, pimento cheese is really highly associated with the Masters golf tournament. But yeah, it was a lovely evening. Oh, and we also had coffee and whiskey.
Yes. So my partner does great cocktails, and he was prepared with his coffee whiskey cocktail, and I made an espresso bourbon glaze to go over these. I did not make these, but I bought these like cinnamon chip cupcakes or muffins as a drizzle so that we can be on theme.
Yes, and we nailed it. We discussed in the previous episode, we've been off with every one of our themed meals by a little bit.
But we were on this time. I feel like it was obvious. But just
so I'll take the win. I'll take it.
For sure.
And we were really like, the one thing we kept saying that we knew Joel loved was coffee. And this episode bore that out. But we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so here we go. This episode is called The Path. Interestingly, they changed the title from the previous title, so they're really messing with me now.
Maybe they do listen to us, because you do predict a lot based on titles, and they know this. I'm starting to think we may have a listener in here.
I remember last time we did this, something strange happened where I was like, somebody might be listening. Probably not, but that's a little interesting that happened.
I do find delight in knowing, like, I know secrets because you divulge it and they don't know I know your secrets this way. Yeah. I can find delight in that.
Yeah. Well, it was supposed to be called Something's Got a Hold on Me, which is an Etta James song about love. And Ellie has an Etta James poster in her room. But the new Final Destination movie, which none of these are sponsors, by the way, I should have said that at the top. The new Final Destination movie has that song as the trailer song, and it takes place in Seattle. And so I was like, what is this? Is this some kind of connection, or is it some coherence that was happening? Maybe that's why they changed it. Or maybe they realized I'm reading too much into these things. Maybe it was very much me. But anyway, so this one is called The Path. And I think that works in a variety of ways, because we have the path that Joel took, that Gail and Tommy talk about together. Gail being the therapist, played by Catherine O'Hara. And then we have the path that Ellie is going on. And then we have the path, more in a religious sense, that we're going to learn more about with the Seraphites. So there's a lot of paths, and there's even a lot of path imagery. They were on kind of a hiking trail, both Ellie and Dina and the Seraphites at a certain point. So that's what it's called.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. I even gave a speech at Joel's wake, and it was terrible. And your partner called me out. And later, somebody texted me and was like, "Did you at least say the nurses thought he was hot?" And I was like, didn't.
I think we all mentioned that because we were talking about the fact that it was like a TikTok. Everybody's like, if the nurse.
Well, after he's murdered everyone, like, but he was hot though.
I mean, but he was super hot.
Even Happy's like,
real evil, but
yeah. But anyway, one thing that I find is interesting about the sort of if things were reversed arguments that people get into, myself included, about this is Ellie says, if it was me or you, Joel would be halfway to Seattle already. And Tommy says, not if we had lost people. He would be there to save my life, but he wouldn't be. And that's interesting because I would think he would want revenge. But I also think, on the other hand, he wouldn't want Ellie to do it. because he wouldn't want her to be in danger. He wouldn't want her to do it for him. So I don't know quite what I think. Because he just seems like a very vengeful person to me, but I do agree he wouldn't want Ellie to do it. And that's kind of an interesting flip of the whole agency conversation, because Ellie didn't want Joel to kill all the fireflies. I would argue, did it largely for himself. I'm not saying he wasn't thinking of Ellie, but I think he just really didn't want to lose another daughter figure. And now she's not really thinking about what Joel necessarily would want, but what would make her feel better, and sort of this vengeance idea. I am going to talk about the whole justice versus vengeance thing, because that's interesting. Also, the credits. The opening credits. Gotta twist the knife, because not only is Pedro Pascal's name not in there anymore, there at the end, when there's two silhouettes, there used to be. Now there's only one. Because she walks the path alone. Oh my gosh. I didn't notice that when we watched it, but man. All right. So this is I feel like the first season did this too, but they did it in the opposite, where there is a very action-packed episode and then a more establishing episode and then an action-packed episode, and sort of that balancing act. So this episode is we're dealing with the fallout of what happened in the very action-packed, dramatic, traumatic previous episode. And if you've watched any behind the scenes at all or heard any interviews at all, you'll know this is not really in the game at all. None of this rebuilding, none of this dealing with grief. It's very interesting because they have plenty of things that are like shot for shot exactly, line for line exactly. And then they have things that are just completely not in there. But this was one where the showrunners were talking about in the game. It essentially cuts from Joel is dead to you're at his graveside, and then you're leaving to get revenge. Like it's quick. And the differences we'll get into in a second, but like it happens very quickly. So this is much more of a moment to grieve this character and to sit in it for a second. But it's still kind of, I feel like for Ellie, because Ellie was in the hospital for so long, she didn't really have that. I think she's this whole time just been consumed with, I want to get out of here. Whereas other people have been working to rebuild the town or whatever it is, bury the dead. But she hasn't had that. I do think it's interesting when Gail comes in to clear Ellie. And Ellie does say, as you mentioned, she says like the right things. It's very obvious she does not believe anything she's saying. I think she's kind of baiting Gail. She's like, oh, yeah. And Gail's like, oh, if only everyone was as healthy as you. But she knows she's lying, and she cleared her anyway. And that, I think that goes back to a line she has later when Tommy comes to her for help and is like, I'm really worried about her. I'm worried she's going to do something like Joel would do, where he would justify things, but he was really lashing out. And Gail says, some people just can't be saved. And one of our friends we were watching it with, who works in the healthcare industry, was very much like, yes! She had like a visceral reaction.
Rightly so.
Yeah. But that whole idea too of Gail being like, oh, Ellie is a liar. Ellie is not just lying. She is a liar. And I think that does relate back to Joel, of his lie that he told Ellie. And it's another way that they're very similar. Going back to the first episode of the season when Tommy said, you and my brother, you're the same person. But Gail makes the point that this is ultimately Ellie. Like, Joel had very little influence on who she is. this is her. And I like that because it feels like a way of giving her agency, even if it's not what you would want for a character that you kind of grew up with. You're like, oh, dang it. But I think that's true. And that can be really hard to accept. And also, yes, I'm very curious. We've mentioned it several times. We don't know this Eugene storyline that's going to happen. It doesn't happen.
He seems to be someone who knew a lot and talked a lot.
Yes. And my theory is like, because he's part of the Fireflies. This isn't a spoiler because I literally don't know.
Prediction.
That Joel, maybe Eugene realized something and Joel killed him preemptively before Gale could say goodbye. Like maybe he was still turning or something, but there was time, but he killed him fast. I don't know, but there's a part of me that thinks that's Gale does. One of the reasons she kind of pushes on what was that last conversation you had, or what was this thing that where he wronged you by saving you. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. And then, yeah, I guess I should have said this earlier, but Seth the Bigot. I said in the last episode he died because I thought he had. He was one of the flamethrower guys that didn't run, and you see him getting knocked over by what I thought was an infected, but in this episode it says friendly fire. But anyway, he's not dead, and even though you don't see him in the game after that first interaction, as far as I can remember, he has a big role in this. He suddenly is on Ellie's side, is getting all the supplies for Ellie and Dina. But that being said, I feel like when I personally watched this, I felt it was more of a kind of shaking hands with the devil situation, because if you listen to his speech, to me, it feels very xenophobic, very us versus them. And he did call Ellie and Dina a pretty terrible thing. And so it just is like, Ellie clearly doesn't want to align with him, but she does because no one else is really helping her. But I think that is like one sign of the lengths she's willing to go in this journey for justice and or revenge, however you fall on that. Also, I didn't realize this. I should have, but there was a whole online backlash about how Belly Ramsey could never be strong enough to be Ellie. And I didn't realize that's why, or at least probably one of the reasons why they've already had like 2 scenes where Ellie is like fighting, like punching, training. The very first scene you see of Ellie in the first episode is of her fighting Caleb. So clearly they're trying to combat that. But I think one of the big things about this episode, and especially this part in the game, is that whole idea of what do you do after someone dies? And the whole scene where she's going through Joel's house, she's looking at his stuff, she's smelling his jacket. It's absolutely devastating. And in the game, they're all optional. There's so many optional things in the game that it's just, if you miss it, I feel like you're missing so much, except for you do have to pick out the gun. You have to get the gun. But everything else, like, if you want kind of a fun Easter egg that I know is going to pay off, like she would go around the house and she'd pick up this dinosaur booklet. There's been a dinosaur in the background of every episode at one point because they're leading up to it. But she just has these memories. She would see an item and have this memory, and it's tough. Usually, like when I first played it, me and my friend would go outside and we would just be like, "Oh, that's because that's what you do." That's what you do. But Ellie does pick out. she picks up the gun and not the watch. The watch is the watch Joel was wearing when his daughter Sarah was shot and was killed, and the time has been stopped. And the watch was something she had fixed for him for his birthday. So it's very symbolic of both the loss of life and I think how time stopped for Joel at that point, and also PTSD. But Ellie does not pick up the watch. She picks up the gun and leaves the watch where it is. Also, you can see how beloved Joel is, because in the game, as I said, it happens immediately, almost. This is 3 months later, and he still had a bunch of like fresh flowers and gifts outside his house. He was the head of construction, so that's a pretty big loss. That's a pretty big loss when your town has just been destroyed. So he was beloved. And you can really see it in when Dina and Ellie go to visit his grave, and Ellie puts the coffee beans on top. By the way, this is the scene I wrote down in. But yes, it will be, if you're kind of confused, they will explain, I believe, the coffee and why she put that on his grave. And the discussion of also the last moment you have with someone that Gail and Ellie have, I think that's going to play out more, and how much influence it has on their memory and what you do in the future. And it's interesting for me because, as I said, I relate this a lot to when my dad died. It was kind of close in time. And you know, Samantha, now every anniversary of his death, I have a shot of vodka, because that's the last thing we talked about. And did he really like vodka? Not that much? No. But it's the last thing we talked about. So I remember it. And I've never visited his grave for a couple of reasons, but watching that scene always gets me. We've alluded to it, and I think it's clear in this episode. Ellie is lying when she says that she didn't go back to the porch, so that there wasn't one more conversation we haven't seen, because she had the guitar back in her apartment, her garage, the next day. So that's where I think the coffee thing will be explained, but it is one of the final scenes in the game, so I don't know when it will come, but yes. Another big theme of all of this whole game, of this whole show, is how trauma and the fallout of it impacts all of our relationships. It changes all of our relationships. And you can see that in this with Ellie and pretty much everyone in her life. But also, we're going to see it more later with Abby and her crew, because they kind of witnessed her do this thing and have to deal with it. And that does bring us to Seattle, where Abby and the crew is based. And it was cool to see. I got very excited. I'm so glad we went to Seattle and did all the things before this, including in the like on the next episode, they had the theater. I'm so excited. I really hope they have the aquarium and the wheel. I don't know if they will, because I'm not sure quite how they'd film it, but I really hope they do. Yes, we are introduced to two warring factions in Seattle, the WLF and the Seraphites, that scene with the Seraphites does kind of continue the father-daughter theme. It also is going to be a continuing example of how different communities dealt with the infected and all of the fallout, because we've already seen a bunch of ways that it's happened. So we're going to continue to see that. All right, big game differences. Quickly. I mentioned in the last one, Tommy and Dina have pretty much been switched. Tommy was the one that was with Joel when he died, not Dina. In the game, Tommy kind of lies to Ellie. I guess that's up for interpretation. I've always figured he kind of lied, but he basically, Ellie's like, let's go. And Tommy's like, we can't go. We don't have the people to spare, but I'll try to convince Maria to do something. And then Ellie wakes up the next day and Tommy has taken off and said, I can't let this stand. I'm going. And Maria says, I need you to go get my dumb husband. And so she gives kind of the okay for Dina and Ellie to go and gives them some equipment. So it's no Seth is involved. It's Maria and Tommy's already ahead. I am very interested what they're going to do with Tommy's plotline. I kind of have a theory, but I will see because it's completely changed right now. Dina's relationship with Joel also is different because they liked each other in the game, but they weren't that close. But this is very much making it like, no, I loved him too. I want to get revenge too for Dina. And Jesse being on the council, that's one. The thing that Samantha was alluding to, at this point in the game, Dina and Ellie are together and have had sex. And so I don't know. We'll see. I think they're going to get together, but I'm not sure. I definitely got a good laugh out of there was only one horse. Ellie's like, oh, only Shimmer. It also made me start thinking about love triangles because I guess I've always thought about the love triangle from Dina's perspective because Ellie's not interested in Jesse. Jesse's not interested in Ellie. They're both interested in Dina. So it feels like Dina has the power. But I would really love to come back and think about that because I guess usually there isn't a queer, in a lot of stuff I've consumed, there isn't a queer aspect of the love triangle. So I always see it from usually the one woman's perspective because she's the one that gets to decide. I don't know. But I just realized when I was rewatching it, I was like, I've always seen it from her point of view. And we will talk about more. I had some other realizations, but I must wait until some future episodes come out. Oh, and one of those things is, this is not in the game. The whole thing where Dina is like, do you ever think like Jesse is sad? And Ellie's like, yes. And Dina has that moment of like, well, I feel like that's just who he is, but what if it's me? I think that's going to be relevant later. Okay. And probably one of the biggest differences to reiterate is that Ellie wasn't hurt. The town wasn't destroyed. They left immediately. But in this, other people lost someone too. The whole town is recuperating. And Ellie had to recuperate herself. And this brings us to the random at the end, just random thoughts I have. So I just think that this is such a creative choice to kill off what people thought would be the main character so early. The development team of the game actually like really begged the writers to change the story because it was so depressing, which we have talked about in previous episodes, but they leaned in. And I also didn't really reiterate this in the last episode, but apart from Abby's monologue, Joel's death scene was pretty line for line, shot for shot, including Abby's iconic line, "You don't get to rush this." In my opinion, she has a more iconic one later, but I have to wait for that. Also, this whole idea about asking for help, it's a recurrent theme, and Dina brings it up in this episode, and it comes up later in the game, at least, where people are like, you could have just asked for help. And I think that's important. Another big theme is women and revenge, which we have done several episodes on. We did one that was kind of specific to The Last of Us, which I don't recommend listening to if you don't want to be spoiled. But a part of me does think the reason people hate Abby so much is that she's a woman and is that Joel is so beloved. And also, as we've discussed before, I think people were really on board with Joel because he was protecting a young girl. So even though he was doing these things that were pretty awful, we were like, yeah, but it's for her. But it sparks a lot of argument, including the whole justice versus revenge thing. But it's just it just spins out so quickly to me, because then you're like, well, Abby was getting justice and now she's put other people in danger because of that. Was she really getting justice, or was it revenge? Justifications versus lashing out, which is what Tommy is talking about with Joel. And one thing that we are going to see is the fallout of revenge, not just trauma, but revenge or justice, I guess. I'll let you have it for now, to everyone in their lives, and even outside of that. Because if you remember, Tommy left Joel because of the violent things that they had to do to survive. He got out, is how he says it. I'm not sure how it's going to play out in the show, because they have changed his story, but I suspect that Ellie is going to pull Tommy and maybe other people back into this violent world that they were trying to get out of. But we shall see. Also, Abby. We got to hear Ellie say it in the tone she says it in the game, where she's like, Abby. Woo! I love it so much. But I did see a lot of posts after that episode about Abby and about how they tried to minimize the backlash against her that the game experienced. One of the things was Pedro Pascal took a lot of selfies with her that showed that they were like very close, and like he's like, oh, I love her, and, like, please, she's a person.
Please. This is acting.
This is acting, and she did that's like one of my favorite things I've seen so far, is like, I hate her, but she nailed it, so I can't be too mad. Like, right. All right, I like that. Because you are supposed to hate her. I'm not saying you're not supposed to. At this point right now, I did, believe me. So, but I think that I appreciate people who can recognize, like, wow, I'm so angry at this character, but this actor really did an amazing job, and I'm not going to harass them in any way. Is that too much to ask? But I do think that's why her monologue exists. I think that's also part of the structure of the show versus the game, which we've discussed. Also, I read an interesting thing about how they changed Joel's death a little bit, where she stabs him with a golf club, and then they show his body being dragged back because so many characters come back in franchises. And I thought that was really funny, because I talked about how I went in the game. I was like, he can't be dead. I would never, I don't believe it. But they went out of their way to be like, nope.
No, he real dead.
He did.
He buried. We washed his dead body. Nothing's happening. Move on.
But another theme I just want to highlight at the very end here is there is going to be a lot of exploration and to empathy and the lack thereof. And one of the things that I really love about video games as a storytelling medium is that you really, if it's a good game, connect to it in such a way. And this game, I just connected to so hard, because it felt like, Ellie wasn't too late. I was too late. Like, it makes you complicit almost in a way. So it's really impactful. But that's definitely something that's going to be explored. I think this whole idea that they keep bringing up in different ways of strangers versus helping outsiders is going to come up, and in terms of empathy with that, because, in the first episode we had Maria being like, you were a refugee too, Joel. But then you see kind of Joel, you have him both saying we can't let everybody in, but then helping Abby. And then you have Seth giving this whole speech. So I think we're going to see more of that. Also, if you picked up on it, in Ellie's room, there was a Matrix poster prominently placed.
Yeah.
I think that's about enlightenment. I think it's about like going through the whole journey, and at the end, maybe coming to a different realization than you thought. Another thing I know that they're playing on is this whole idea of the youth inheriting the earth, and what are they going to inherit, and what is it going to look like. And so that scene where Tommy is, kind of using the hammer to hammer in the stakes, and then Jesse's like, You want me to do it? And he takes over. Like, there's a lot of instances of seeing younger people take over. So I think that's going to be another theme. But Abby's fury is a part of that. And the choice she made is a part of that. And the choice Ellie has made is a part of that too. So we shall see. But yes, I'm so excited for the next episode. Oh. But in the meantime, listeners, if you have any thoughts, anything to add, please let us know. You can email us at hello@stuffInevertoldyou.com. You can also find us on Blue Sky at Momstuff Podcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christine, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.